dad's done for work since I was 12 years old. So after school, I would go to his office and file resumes, and could always hear him prepping candidates in the background. So kind of have that his speech down cold, if you will. And a lot of this is common sense, and some of it may be, just refresher and reminder, but it makes sense to, if you take one thing away, then we're ahead of the game. And I will keep things light. The slides are more visual than they are word heavy, but I did also send Rashawn a document that sort of like take home notes that says everything that I'm saying, so that you can have that as a reference going forward. And that's me.
I'll go next. I'm Rashawn Peak. I am interested in this session because I just looked at my 17-year-old, she'll be 18 on the 29th resume, and it's horrible. I'm so embarrassed. So this should be helpful in maybe getting me some keys, some pointers to help her along.
I am Tiffany Allen, Executive Director, and just want to learn more. I'm always learning. So again, thanks for being with us today.
Hi, this is Cheryl Monsanto. Can y'all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I am interested in this meeting because Wells Fargo just said they need to cut $20 billion in costs. So that's not good and encouraging news, and I haven't been interviewing in quite some time. So I think this would be a great refresher for me to have under my belt.
My name is Monique Folson. I'm here with my daughter, Malaya Folson, and we attended Empower Her last summer, and I got an email and thought I'd Zoom and listen to what you guys had to say.
Welcome.
Thank you. The last one that I see is Giovanna.
Sorry, I was multitasking. Hi, just as Tiffany said, here to learn. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. I shared my screen. Can you see pitching yourself as a product?
Yeah. I
Great.
see it fine.
Awesome. So one of the key things, and I'll touch on this a little bit more, is that really the whole interview process is a sales process. You are selling yourself like you would be as if you were a product. And your resume really is a brochure. So let me go through. Brief agenda. I will touch very briefly on resume, since this really was intended to focus on interviews, but we can certainly do a follow-up if there's interest specifically to focus on resumes. And then I'll talk about kind of 5 different kinds of interviews that you may go through during the interview process, and talk a little bit about how those are different, and talk about preparation. 3 things that you need to do before every interview, and 2 websites that really will be all you need to help you shine every time. And then we'll talk a little bit about the interview itself and some best practices, and then how to follow up. And I'll give you some short follow-up templates. So ways to build your resume, like I said, I'm just going to touch on this very briefly. Obviously, there's paid jobs, but then all other kinds of activities can be used to flesh out a resume, especially if you're young and just getting started and looking for opportunities. So volunteering, internships, paid or unpaid, and then youth groups, any leadership roles that you may have, whether that be through your church or scouts or any other kind of organization. And then also ones that are given through your school, extracurricular activities like school groups or teams, I know, for instance, I'm a nerd. Let's just lay that out there. But I worked on the school newspaper when I was in high school in the yearbook. And so when I was going into college, those things were listed on my resume as activities that I was a member of, and also on the swim team. And some of my early jobs were fast food and babysitting and some of those kinds of things. And they were great to have listed there as well, just so that then I could use my employers as references when I was looking for more sort of serious kinds of jobs. So all of these things can go into fleshing out a resume. Not that you want to really add more than you need, because a resume should be brief, and like I mentioned, is really a brochure. And the important thing about a resume is just to get somebody interested to talk to you further. It doesn't need to say everything, and it should be something that they can skim fairly quickly and show that you're a person of substance that they want to have a conversation with. And like I said, that's really all I'm going to touch on with resumes, just looking at other ways to build those up. But happy to do a follow-up around that and some resume best practices later if we want. So I'm going to talk about a few different kinds of interviews as we go through, and just really to sort of explain some different ones that may happen. One is a screening interview, and that'll happen if you submit for a job and talk to somebody initially who's just in HR. And there's several different names for that now: human resources, a recruiter, or now also they've gotten fancy and sometimes call that talent acquisition. That person really is going to be just screening to make sure that you're a good fit and make sure that it makes sense for you to take the time and for the person on their team to take the time to have a further conversation about your skills and knowledge. And that skills and knowledge interview usually will happen with the future boss, which may also be called the hiring manager. And that's the person that you'd be working directly for. You may also sometimes have multiple interviews within an organization, something like a cultural fit. And so that may be an interview with somebody that would be a peer that you would work with when you get there, or people from other teams that you would interact with on a regular basis. They're going to be less focused on whether or not you can do the specific job that you're being interviewed for, and focus a little bit more on what it is that their corporate culture tends to require, and if you fit within that. And then there may be sort of a rubber stamp type interview with somebody in an executive role. So there's a couple of things to keep in mind, considering that you may talk to different people as you go through a process of interviewing. One is that several of these people are gatekeepers. So the goal is to really get past those people, like the HR people or maybe the cultural fit people, and get information from them that will help you with getting to the next step in the process. It really doesn't matter if you like those people. It's just important that they like you. But in the case of the hiring manager or the boss, it is a good thing to feel good about that person and feel like you've struck up some kind of a rapport with them or a good relationship. So it's somebody that you could see working with on a day-to-day basis. If you find that person off-putting during the interview process, it's possible that they're not going to enjoy working for them. And that's an important thing to note when you're looking for jobs as well. Personally, I've never quit a job. I've only quit bosses, because they tend to be the number one thing that make an impact on whether or not I am happy in my day-to-day job. So note here, I said 5 types of interviews, but there's only 4 listed. The 4th one is informational interviews. These, especially for young people, can be really helpful. And an informational interview can be all kinds of things. If you're curious about day-to-day job that somebody has, and don't necessarily see that there's an opening at their company or organization, you can still reach out to someone there and ask for an informational interview, especially right now with everybody kind of trapped at home and looking for ways to break up the monotony of their day, and get face-to-face with somebody new. I know I personally, as a sheltered in place extrovert, been loving meeting new people online. And this is a common practice to, as you're starting out and just curious about an area or a career, if you know somebody who works at a company that you're interested in, you can ask them, or you can also just do some blind, outreach to talk to somebody who's in a role that you're interested in. This is also something that you can practice, perhaps with somebody within the empowerment organization, or a teacher, or somebody who runs another kind of organization that you're in, just to get some information, just to get some interview practice. So it's a great opportunity, even if there isn't a role available, to reach out and make yourself known. It also sometimes can bring up ideas for prospective internships or things that they may not have been seeing and recognize a need for, and then it can be beneficial for both of you. So once you've got an interview scheduled, there are 3 things that you need to do every time. You need to make sure that you are really well versed on your resume and practice answering questions about yourself. So you have to assume they're going to ask you to walk through your resume. As you go through your resume, you're going to give brief explanations about each job and sort of what led you from one thing to the other. And you want to go through that fairly quickly, because really the crux of this conversation should be about the company or organization, what they need, and how you can fill those needs. The other thing that you need to make sure to do is to research the company or the organization so that you're prepared and are able to follow along and participate in the conversations that you're having. And then also to prepare questions that come out of that research that you're doing. A couple other things you want not to do is you never want to be negative as you're going through your history. You never want to say a bad thing about a place that you worked or an experience that you had. You need everything to sound positive. You also don't want to bring up money. This may come up toward the end and we'll touch on it again later, but that certainly can never be a motivator for why it is that you chose to go from one job to another. So nowadays, a lot of interviews are kind of behavioral. Tell me about a time when, but they can still ask you some of those old tricky ones like, strengths and weaknesses. And if that happens, you can point to a weakness that you're aware of, but that you're working on. So I, for example, know that punctuality is not my strongest suit, so I may point that out, or find it something that's a little bit less scary for a prospective employer. But do also know that even though you want your review of your resume to be brief, they may ask questions about anything on your resume. So you need to be prepared to speak to it should they ask a question about a particular bullet point. And don't be afraid to practice this. Practice it a lot. Practice it in the mirror, especially that brief resume walkthrough. It really should only take about 2 minutes to go through your entire resume and cover the highlights. And as you're going through and prepping, you can write notes about the different pieces of your resume or experiences, but don't have them in front of you because that may be, you don't want it to sound scripted. You want to stay high energy at all times and make sure that it doesn't sound quite rehearsed. When you're doing your research to prepare about the company, so this is practicing for talking about yourself, but then when you're preparing to be knowledgeable about the company, there are 2 websites that are critical. One is the company's website itself. Make sure that you've gone through it, basically every page on there, particularly if you're going after a specific job and there's a job description. You need to make sure that you have thoroughly read that and understand it. But the website, it will also tell you other good information, including recent news, if they've recently won an award or launched a new product or a new initiative, then those are all really good things to know, just to have in your arsenal as things to pick up on. You should also Google them to see what else is being said about them, broadly speaking, or other information that their company website may not have. Make sure, again, that you review the job description and any news, because those announcements are great material for questions that you can ask in the interview if they ask you if you've got any more questions. Excuse me, as the interview is concluding. Some other useful websites, LinkedIn or Facebook, to look up the person that you'll be meeting with if you know their name. There's also a website called Glassdoor that has information about companies. If you're interviewing with a for-profit business, that may also have reviews about their interviews and interview practices that can be helpful from people that have gone through it recently. So make sure that you are prepared so that you've got questions, so that you seem that you're engaged, enthusiastic, and are ready to dive in, and that you're a good fit for this company and culture, as opposed to just somebody looking for any old gig. As I mentioned before, this is absolutely a sales process. So you cannot turn down a job that you haven't been offered. So the main goal of this whole process is to get the offer, whether or not you want the job. So just like any sales process, you want to go through, the basic steps of all sales. Create rapport or create a relationship, and then determine the need, sell to the need, overcome the objections, and close the deal. And I'll go through those a little bit more detail. So there's kind of a arena to getting someone to engage with you in a sales capacity and purchase something from you or hire you for a job. And it's called know, like, and trust. So you want to establish likability. You know, that knowledge and trust comes from having done your research and shown that you are enthusiastic about the role and that you're knowledgeable about their company and products. And you also want to sort of have a general likability about you. Talk thing, not everybody's favorite thing to do, but when you first engage in an interview and kind of, hello, how are you? You know, if someone has referred you to the person you're speaking with, then make sure you know what was said during that introduction so that you can reference that, and or ask some questions, some personal questions, some light ones. You know, a great question is, well, when you're not here 12 hours a day, what do you do in your free time? And it can feel a little forced, but try to, you know, practice something else that you can practice during your informational interviews to ensure that you are kind of finding a nice balance between getting an interview started fairly quickly, but also making sure that you've established some relationship ground level as you go through the interview process. So another key thing, good salespeople are great listeners. You really need to make sure that you're listening to what's being asked and what the company's needs are. And it's okay to take notes. So really the only things that you should have in front of you are a copy of your resume and a little notepad. That way, if you've got questions that come up as the interviewer is speaking, you can circle back to them. But it also, I personally am not an auditory learner. I always need to write things down for them to really sink into my brain. But it's really important that you listen to what it is that they're saying when they're asking the questions and what they are saying that the needs are for the role. Because if they speak about some needs and you have a way to refer to past experience you have, that's going to be the most valuable kind of conversation. If they speak about a need and you answer with something that is irrelevant and demonstrates that you weren't clearly listening, that's going to be off-putting. So even if you don't have something that's an exact lineup for what they're asking, make sure that you emphasize that you are in fact listening and can clarify. So some good listening questions that you can ask as you're having these conversations are, help me understand. Just if you're looking for additional clarification, or do you mean to confirm that what your understanding was correct? Or can you tell me a little bit more about blank? Or let's make sure I've got this right. A couple good things that help with this, or a couple good things these help with. One is making sure that you're demonstrating you're an active listener, but also can give you time to kind of mentally pause a little bit as you ask them to repeat or rephrase something so that you can formulate a solid answer to a question that they've asked. You can also say, you know, I've noticed blank, do you agree? Or does that apply here? All of these are good questions to indicate that you've been listening and that you are synthesizing the information that they're giving you. If all else fails, this is an amazing word, interesting. In an early job that I had, early career role I had, I did market research for a living. I gave an hour-long presentation to a bunch of executives. At the conclusion, one of the most senior people in the room just looked up at me and said, interesting. And then he continued eating his muffin as he walked out the door. I thought this was amazing because it basically indicated to me that he'd heard everything I was saying, that he was thinking about it, that it had some value, but wasn't positive or negative. So it didn't leave me feeling like I had done a good job or a bad job. It just indicated that he was listening and had taken in the information. So it's also another good, just sort of, if nothing else, just say interesting. And then you can take the conversation in a different direction. Of course, maintain positivity while you're doing this so that it doesn't sound like you're being condescending in any way. But it's a phenomenal word. Make sure, as I said, that you are happy while you're selling. You are the product, so you need to pitch it with a big old smile. Make sure that everything is positive and on the up and up, that you are excited to be there and showing your enthusiasm. Everything is groovy. Never be negative. They may say something that doesn't sound appealing to you, like, oh, well, your job is going to be cleaning out the trash liner bins every day for 12 hours a day. Like, just keep on smiling, because you can't turn down a job you haven't been offered. And the important thing is to get offered the job and then evaluate everything that you know to determine whether or not you're going to take it. So you never want to be negative. And you always, always want to maintain eye contact and a good open body position. So on that note, that came out a little fuzzy, but make sure you're smiling, leaning in, demonstrating that you're interested in the role, and also make sure that you're dressed appropriately. So here I just want to take a quick minute and talk about what that means. So you are the product, and you're dressing up the product that you're trying to sell. So you want to wear neutral, conservative clothes. You just want to eliminate any downside bias. Make sure your clothes are clean and pressed and that you're in good condition. Now, granted, if you're doing this over Zoom or online in some way, then this really pertains to the waist up. But if you're going to be in person, then also make sure that everything, including your shoes and bag, are at least neat and tidy. And if you are, always make sure that you're on time for the interview, and that if you're online, that you're in a well-lit environment that's quiet, hopefully with reliable internet, with an appropriate background so that there's no distractions. And make sure that you don't have your phone on or on the desk in front of you at all. And all of this goes the same for if you're going in person. And then you just want to make sure that you're arriving a few minutes early if you're showing up on site. As you're going through the interview process, always got to stay positive. As they're talking and discussing what the role and the requirements are, listen for any objections that they may have so that you can respond to them and help overcome them. If they are looking for someone who's got 2 to 3 years of experience with something and that you only have one, maybe you can address that and say that while you have 1 year of experience with this one thing, these other years of experience in something relevant make up for the fact that you don't have the 3 years of experience they're looking for in one area. There's all kinds of ways to fill a void with your background to fit whatever it is that their needs are. Another thing just on that is that a job posting or job listing is usually kind of a wish list. It's very rare that they're going to find a candidate that fits literally all of the needs that they've laid out in that job description, if there is one when you're having a conversation. Some good questions to ask while you're going through the interview. As I mentioned before, recent news items. You can also ask about the team, how it fits within the organization as a whole. So if you are speaking to the person that would be your boss, you can ask about their peers and their boss and how many other people are on their team. If you're talking to somebody else that is a peer on your team, you can ask about their history with the organization. You can even ask what they like and don't like, and how things have maybe changed if they've been there for a while. You can ask more detail about the role itself. If this is an internship, then there's going to be a set period of time perhaps, and what the total goal is or what the project is. And if it's a long-term role, then you can ask what you see this person doing in the first 30, 60, 90 days, or how do you see this person being most successful as they come on board? These are all great questions to indicate that you're interested in understanding the day-to-day a little bit more. And also never hesitate to ask clarification questions about any of the information that they've brought up during the interview or the job description itself. And then you gotta sell, gotta close out and strong because you're looking to make a deal. So, as you end the conversation, a couple of great things you can say are, is there anything else I can tell you that would help you evaluate me for this role? Or if you're short on time, you can just say, I'm very excited about this opportunity. What are the next steps? And make sure to say thank you. But one key thing is after you ask either of those first questions, is there anything else I can tell you? Or I'm very excited about this opportunity. Then just pause and listen. Wait for them to respond, because during that brief pause, they're going to be sort of cementing their perception of you. And if they have follow-on questions, they will ask. Always, always say thank you. Stay positive. Good vibes only. And don't bring up money unless they do. So I said we'd touch on this a little bit. And if they ask, then you can say, right now if you're transitioning from one job to another, say right now I'm making X, or I'm interested in X amount of money. But of course, there's a lot of factors making a job change. And there's many components to compensation. Maybe it's got a more flexible schedule that's better for you, or maybe they offer benefits, whereas your last role didn't. There's more than just the base salary. Also good to just basically say right now, my interest in changing isn't motivated by money. I'm looking for an opportunity to grow in X way, or I'm looking for a company that has Y offering. The reason you don't bring up money is because until they know they want to hire you, it can just present a problem. Either it can be off-putting, or you could leave money on the table because perhaps the salary that they have intended for this position is more than what you would have said. You certainly don't want to do that. So if it does come up, regardless of how they respond, just stay positive and try to focus on the other aspects of the benefits that you would get from the role. Then don't forget to follow up. Say thank you. You immediately need to send a thank you note. And then also you want to follow up in about a week if you haven't heard back from anyone. So I've included a few templates. One's just general. Dear Ms. Carlisle, it was a pleasure meeting you today. Thank you for making the time to interview me. I truly believe my background and experience, with blank would really set me up for success. I look forward to hearing from you. Hope you have a wonderful day. Warm regards. Hopefully in that sort of small talk that you went through, you found some shared interests and you can point to that, or anything that sort of came up that was topical and notable from your conversation. It was wonderful meeting you. I appreciate you taking the time. I'm excited to be considered and for the specific position and all the opportunities with the company. It was lovely chatting with you about our shared passion of basketball, or whatever. Thank you for your consideration. Have a great rest of your day. And then if you do have additional questions that weren't answered during the interview, you can also ask them in a follow-up thank you note. Brief thank you. I enjoyed our discussion, and a few questions came up that I would like to ask. Question 1, question 2. I appreciate your consideration and look forward to hearing from you. Hope you have a wonderful day. And these are just a couple of short ones that I included. I also included in the notes I gave to Rashawn, but you can Google interview thank you note templates and you will find a million. Same with resume formats, actually. If you Google resumes, it's a great way to look at how other people have described positions that they've had, and you can take those and craft them to be your own rather than having to start from a blank page. Always helpful. And with that, I'm gonna open it up for questions.
Awesome. I have some questions. I'll just start with one.
Yeah.
So with the whole virtual let people like you, how do you think that the best approach in showing your personality virtually is without either seeming weird, like any recommendations?
Well, I do think, I mean, I like, for example, I love your background because you've got, you know, some plants of color, and it's more than just just a blank wall. So in some respects, that can be a good way because it can be a talking point. I've got this little virtual background thing that's got my work poster on it, but if I didn't, then it would just be a blank wall right now. So that would be a good way. You know, I wouldn't necessarily want to do it through clothing, although there was a period of time where I was constantly wearing San Francisco Giants shirts for every Zoom meeting I had, but those were always with people I knew. But if you've got something that you're into, that you could have sort of in the background that may prompt someone to ask you questions, that is a great thing. And do all of the sleuthing that you can on that person. Well, cyber stalking to find out ways to subtly drop questions to them to get them to share more information, because really you want the person you're interviewing with to do most of the talking when you're being interviewed, believe it or not.
That's good. Thank you.
I hope that helped.
Anybody else got questions? Comments? Oh, time. So if your interview is at 5 Zoom time, what time do you log in?
Start trying to log in about 5 minutes to 5, because in case you've got problems, then you can let the person know that you're struggling to get in there. Like I think I started trying to get in about 3 minutes of today, and at first I got one thing and then another. So yeah, because you never know what kind of technical difficulty you're going to run into. But yeah, Johanna.
So Danny, I have a question. My question is, in this day and age with COVID and you know, it has such a high unemployment rate, and the kids are really affected now. Do you have any suggestions on particular jobs that they should look into getting? I mean, like, or what's a good beginner job, would you think, for someone that's like, you know, 16, 17 and just don't really have a job? Like, where would you start? Because I mean, the unemployment rate is what, 25% now?
Yeah.
So a lot of those jobs are these are jobs that kids would have. Retail, Chick-fil-A, TJ Maxx, where I would work if I was a kid. So what all these things. What should a kid do, or what would you recommend? I mean,
so literally right now, the census is hiring for people to go door to door. I don't know if they have age requirements. I haven't checked, but I know they're hiring.
Yeah.
For people to go out and be canvassing. And I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they keep pushing back the start date of when they're going to do that as things open and close. So obviously that's going to be different in every geography. Political campaigns right now also are going to be very active as we're coming up. And so there will be things that can be done, whether they be online call centers. They're going to have to figure out how to do those, more the polling.
Yeah.
To do those geo-distributed, but those are going to be short-term jobs that may be good things to look into. There's also a good handful. I was telling Rashawn about an organization called Ladies Get Paid, and it's this online community, and the whole focus of it is just to help empower women. It was originally created to bridge the wage gap, the gender gap with salaries, but now, given our current environment, kind of has spread to some broader topics. And I'm going to pop that into the chat.
Ladies Get Paid.
Yeah. Ladies Get Paid. I think it's ladiesgetpaid.com/join. I'll look it up real quick to make sure to give you all the correct one. And it's the entire community is on Slack, but and then they also have webinars. A lot of which are free, and some of which are for a nominal fee, but lots of people post resources there routinely of just places that they know that are hiring. And it's a really great community to ask if you're getting ready to go have an interview somewhere. It's just a great place to ask if anybody knows somebody there or has worked there, because they may have some insider information that they'll be happy to share. It's just amazingly supportive group.
So Cheryl shared that Wells Fargo announced that they're cutting millions of dollars. Would you recommend someone wait or be proactive about looking for something? I'm all about energy and stuff happening, so I'm okay with like leaping out there, but some people are risk averse. So what would you say to the weary, to the leery?
There's no time like the present, and as I said before, can't emphasize enough, you can't turn down a job you haven't been offered. So even if you intend to try to, hold on to your current job and see what kind of severance thing happens, and, maybe be able to benefit from that for a little while, it still makes sense to get out there and to start having some of these initial conversations and those informational type interviews, especially, Cheryl said about herself, it's been a little while, she's got to dust some things off. There's no time like the present, because it could take longer than you think to find the next thing. And timing is everything. I mean, it's amazing the number of opportunities I've had in my life where I look at it, it's like, wow, that was lucky. And it's like, my dad would say in response to that, when I was talking about things, like, yeah, but you did all the things you needed to do so that when that thing showed up and right in front of you, you were actually prepared and able to take advantage of that. It's not that it was some respects luck that you recognized an opportunity or happened to be in the right place at the right time. But if you hadn't done all of the work to do the preparation stuff, wouldn't matter. That opportunity would have come and you still wouldn't have been able to take advantage of it.
So before we close out and I turn it over to Tiffany to bid us goodbye, any recommendations for second interviews? She left.
No, she's that was funny. Yes, actually, and thank you so much for asking that. Like I said, if you haven't heard back, make sure you follow up again in about a week, and just saying, hey, what's the next steps? Hoping to hear from someone, and then make sure that you carry forward all of the information that you had. Take good notes and go back even after when you're done with the interview. Go back and scribble a few more notes, and if you are having that next interview, it should be with either a different person on the team or more detail and more specificity about a role. So make sure you sort of refresh the questions that you're prepared to go in and ask based on the information you got the first time.
Awesome. Some great information. I really appreciate your willingness to show up.
Oh yeah.
And
Nice to see people and be seen.